Hello, everyone. This is Andrew Gaffney, Editorial Director with Demand Gen Report and our new publication, Marketing Insights and Data. I'm joined by my colleague, Brian Anderson, our news editor. And we have a special guest joining us today, Ken Wincko. Ken is the Senior VP of Marketing with PR Newswire. Ken, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Ken, we read with great interest the recent white paper that you guys published on PR Newswire, published on becoming a data-driven CMO. It was very closely aligned with what we're writing about and talking about on Marketing Insights and Data. Within the paper, you talked about how critical it is for today's CMOs to develop a data-driven strategy. As a head of marketing yourself, is this something that you've struggled to make that shift in the organization, or what are some of the biggest things that you've had to do to overcome that?
Well, it's absolutely critical to be a data-driven CMO, and I would say it's not even just critical; it's imperative. When you look at the economic environment, we're in a slow growth economic environment, and that itself is driving the need for proving ROI. And the statistics actually show that while a large majority of marketers say that over 80% say that ROI is their number one objective, less than a third say they actually can prove it. And so you have this big delta, this big gap, and particularly for smaller to mid-sized enterprises, it's very, very difficult for them to be able to demonstrate that ROI. And that's mainly because of three main reasons. First is, in order to be able to have the right data, you need to have the right infrastructure set up and the right tracking from a technology perspective. Second is, you need to have the right expertise, and everybody on the team has to be on the same page in terms of what that overall approach is, so that you can actually track what the impact is. And then third, from a process perspective, you really need to be able to move fast, and there's a lot of hesitancy within many marketing organizations. If you say to somebody, okay, look, we want to track this program, we want to put data behind this, they worry that's going to slow things down, right, and there's some initial resistance. So even from a cultural perspective, there's some challenges in terms of getting people on board. And at PR Newswire, when we first started out, there was no data, there were no KPIs or metrics, and it was definitely a cultural shift in getting people on board. But really what I sold the team on was the fact that, look, no matter what department you're in, whether you're in communications, whether you're in product marketing, whether you're in channel marketing or digital, social, we actually can show how you personally are contributing to the top line growth for the company. And now we are at that point.
Which gives them a much greater stake in the game. And
it gives them a lot more credibility within the organization. And number two, it provides, actually, if you think about it, a lot more employee satisfaction, because they actually can see what they're doing day to day and how it's driving the business.
Yeah, great points.
In the paper, you lay out the critical role that content plays within the process of engaging buyers. What's the connection between data and the content? Is it more a matter of measurement, or is it about the insights?
Actually, it's both. So the way that we look at it from a content, it really starts with that outside-in view of understanding what the buyer needs are along the buyer's journey. So what we did is we basically try to glean a better understanding of what those core needs are contextually, whether you are a PR executive, whether you're a marketing executive, or an agency principal, or any other core audience that we have. We really want to dig in and understand your needs. So it really starts with that buyer insight externally, doing your market research, ethnographic research, actually understanding what their day-to-day pain points are and what their objectives are and how you can help them. So that's the first piece of it. The second piece of it then is, it's not a set it and forget it type of situation. What you want to be able to do is to have the analytics set up that you then can optimize your program from a content perspective based on the topics that are resonating with your audiences. So we have something that we call Impact Expectation Score that we use, which is really how many downloads of a particular piece of content are we getting, and then what is the conversion rate or the elasticity of that content offer, and how much pipeline and revenue did it drive. So we actually then optimize on a weekly basis through our content calendar what content we are promoting to whom based on the performance of that content. And then we optimize on a continuous basis going forward.
Yeah, it's really interesting about the impact score there. One of the other related topics that's covered in the paper is the critical role of demand generation, which is obviously near and dear to our hearts. But you talk in the paper about the ability and the need to track demand gen processes across interactions and map to prospects. Can you talk a little bit about how you've done that at PR Newswire and any suggestions that you make to CMOs and how this becomes part of an overall data-driven strategy?
Sure. First, let me say, and this will make you happy, everything that we do within our marketing team is focused on demand generation. Everything.
Good to hear,
And there was really a 7-step process, and you can read about it on our blog or in the paper that you're referencing. So the main pieces are, number one, starting with the buyer insight and and then number two, mapping your content to specific buyer needs based on the type of organization, based on the type of role, and then based on what stage of the cycle they're in. Right. Then you really need to look at, from a data and analytics perspective, a data perspective, who are you targeting? Who are the key influencers? And the important part there from a demand generation perspective is that the typical buyer actually consumes over a dozen sources of information. So they go to 12 different sources, and they're going to all these different places. And a typical B2B decision, as you know, has between 8 to 10 key decision makers and influencers. So it's not just one person. So if you don't have the right database set up, when I started out at PR Newswire, only 48% of our database was usable. So, and then out of that, over 80% of it was really operational contacts. So they weren't the key decision makers or influencers. They didn't have budget or authority. And so we were getting shut out of conversations. And so we went about cleaning up that data and augmenting that data through a third party. So that's really the third component. Then you have to have the right technology infrastructure. So if you're going to create this great experience for buyers across channels, all of your channels need to be connected. So whether it's your blog, whether it's your website, whether it's enablement from a sales or a service perspective, everybody's got to be on the same page, pushing out the same content with the same message in a consistent way. Right. And then that gets into this multi-channel approach that we can talk about, where if you're coordinated and consistent, then you're going to be more compelling. And then the final piece is having the organizational structure set up, and that is also based on the lead management process. So you need to have warm handoffs based on service level agreements, where you're tracking those leads coming through from nurture to handoff, and we can talk about that as well.
Yep, that's great.
Yeah, the whole multi-channel aspect, the buyer's journey isn't linear anymore. There has to be consistency
That's
through
right.
all channels. Is it still a challenge for B2B, for organizations to, effectively engage buyers through all of these channels and effectively measure and connect them?
It is extremely difficult, and why I say that is you have this proliferation of channels digitally, and you look at channels that didn't exist 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Yep. And so you have a proliferation of channels, and at the same time, if you look at mobile and just the explosion of information being consumed on mobile, that's where 80% of people are spending their time in apps. Right. And so when you look at that, that's changing the game as well. And so from a multi-channel perspective, a lot of organizations are not set up in order to be able to create that consistent, compelling message. And we have done some research based on our own data and our own programs. And there were 2 interesting facts that came out of the data. So the number of channels that you use exponentially increases your impact. So let me actually share our numbers over the past year. When we used consistently and in an integrated way 6 to 8 channels at the same time, we saw a 5x increase in the number of downloads and almost a 50% increase in conversion rate on that content. Wow. Not only that, but then if you actually coordinate those channels and you promote them within a short time frame, within 2 or 3 days, we saw another 4x. So you go up 5x by increasing the number of channels, and then by promoting them within a short duration, you actually increase the impact by another 4x in number of downloads. So there's an exponential impact in terms of the correlation between the number of channels you use and within a short duration. So you need to have your team coordinated across channels, working together, and we actually do that on a weekly basis.
Now, when you talk about 6 channels, what are some of the things that you consider channels, and which ones are sort of top of the list for you?
That's a great question. So, paid media is certainly the number one channel for us in terms of impact, and that is mostly based on the fact that it's programmatic. It's easy to do. So certainly that's something. But I would also say our second best channel, we talked about data before in the database. The database, the outbound house list, is our second biggest channel in terms of pipeline impact. And then the third are our own channels, our website, And then, so if you look at those are the 3 primary channels, but then we're also seeing a huge impact, and you also see another almost 4x impact when you add in press releases, you add in blog and social. So most people today, most marketers look at communications like social, and they're tracking likes and followers and metrics like that. But what they're not really doing is able to demonstrate what is that impact on pipeline and revenue contribution from social, from blog, from PR. And we at PR Newswire are able to do that. So we know what deals were influenced by PR, by social, by the blog, by paid media, and we actually prioritize our investment of those channels based on the impact.
That's great. So some of the things we were talking about in measurement, the paper you wrote also talks about automation and technology and the growing role of that. It's kind of a new frontier for a lot of marketers. When you talk about left brain, right brain, is that something that you see marketing executives struggling with, and how are they dealing with the increased role of technology?
That's a great question, and I will tell you that as I talk to other marketing executives, even at some major brands, there are some big brands, Fortune 500 brands, that aren't using marketing automation, and to me that's astounding because I don't see how you can effectively market today without it. There's just not enough time in the day, and without automation, when I started PR Newswire, everything that we ran was manual. So we had a very small team, and we were running campaigns on a one-off basis. What we run now through marketing automation is a 24/7, 365, and the most important thing, Andrew, as part of this marketing automation process is that it's buyer initiated. Buyers are in control. They want to own that buying experience. They're focused on self-service. They're self-educating, whether it's on their own or through friends, family, colleagues, and they want to be interacted with when and how and where they want to be interacted with. And so if you engage them in a way where they are initiating that action and then you're responding to their needs versus pushing, it's a pull versus a push. And actually a phrase that I've been using within my marketing team is, great marketing is about serving, it's not about selling. If you provide the right information that is valuable to them, the buyer, it's a value exchange. You give them great information and content, and then they answer questions about themselves through that marketing automation process. So that is critical.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So when it comes to the evolving automation and technology in the space, obviously the skill sets of your marketing teams have to evolve as well. How have you been combating or working with the changing skill sets within your marketing teams, and how have you seen other organizations tackling that initiative?
Well, technology, as we just talked about, is a critical competency to have within your marketing team, as well as data and analytics. So what we've done at PR Newswire is we've done 2 main things to actually become more buyer-centric. Number one is we've aligned key responsibilities across the entire marketing team to the buyer's journey. So if you think of 3 main phases of the demand generation process, engaging buyers, nurturing them, and then converting them in a continuous cycle, we have teams that are aligned with those core responsibilities, which is not traditional. It's not a traditional functional marketing organization. And it's very collaborative. So we have a centralized and cohesive strategy that's flexible and agile, but then at the same time, we are focused on, through data and analytics, optimizing that experience. The second thing is we've shifted the type of talent within the team over the last 2 years. So in the past, we had people who were very specialized. They knew data, or they were great at writing content, or they knew a particular channel. But what we've done now is we've recruited people, what I call athletes, where they actually have 3 main skill sets. They can write content, and every single person on our marketing team writes content for us. And not just marketing, by the way, just on a quick aside, it's sales, service, product, subject matter experts within the organization, as well as externally, who can provide that authoritative voice to buyers. Back to the talent. So the first piece is the content. Second piece is data and analytics. So when we think about becoming a data-driven organization, whether you're in social or whether you're in charge of the blog or product marketing, everybody is focused on driving their decisions based off the data. So that's the second component. So that's been a big shift. And then the third piece is on technology. So everyone in our team actually has knowledge. Of course, some more than others in terms of our marketing automation software and other technology, but every single person. And I will tell you that we actually have a large percentage of people on our team that are certified on our marketing automation. Over 25% of our team is on the way to becoming certified. So it's a huge shift in terms of expectation, but it's also a requirement to really be effective today.
Yeah, those are great points. I like the athletes correlation there too, especially with March Madness kicking off today. One final question I want to ask you, it's come up a few times in the points you made, is around sales. So the role of sales, you talked about warm handoffs, you talked about them actually contributing to content. Talk about the changing relationship between marketing and sales, some of the things you're doing from a marketing standpoint to support sales, and just where you're seeing successes there.
Sure. So when we started out, as I mentioned earlier, we really had low credibility within the organization because we weren't able to demonstrate any impact. So sales and product team really looked at us as more as a collateral shop, maybe doing some communications, maybe some events here and there. And really, as we've gone through this process, and I think gaining their alignment to the overall strategy was critical. That's number one. Number two was the service level agreements in terms of when you hand over a lead as a marketing team, this is what the sales team is going to do with it. And this is the expectation in terms of turnaround time and how you're going to respond to that lead, whether it's a warm lead or a hot lead. And if there's a turn back from a lead, what happened with that? How do we handle that? And then what is the expectation in terms of the result? So for us, it's been a very close partnership. We are tighter than we've ever been. And one of the key things that we focused on is actually enabling our sales team in a tighter fashion with what marketing is doing. So they have email templates that are tied to the content that we are promoting through the marketing channels. They are getting education and training on what the key personas are from an expectation and a needs perspective, and they're going to market with those same talking points. Instead of talking about product, they're leading with, we understand what your problems are. We have solutions for you. Let's talk about it. And they're more consultative. So the relationship is much tighter, and I can say that it's been a huge increase. We've actually increased our marketing qualified leads over 166% year over year, and our marketing influenced revenue has increased over 360% year over year. So the sales team is seeing so much more value. They're getting great insight on buyer needs. So they know before they walk in the door, they know what they've got, the right person, they've got the authority. They know what the needs are, they know the timing, and most importantly, they know what the goals are. So through the content, we actually ask the prospective buyer, hey, what are your goals for your campaign and your program? And that is great insight for the sales team before they walk in the door. They used to go in cold. Right. What we did is we aligned the lead management process to the sales pipeline process. So now the salespeople, once they get a lead, they go directly to the pursue stage. So over 50% of the buying process is complete by the time we hand over a lead to sales.
That's great. Really impressive results. Congratulations. I appreciate you sharing with us. Yeah, I'm sure it never ends, right? I also want to encourage and remind all of our readers and viewers that the guide to becoming a data-driven CMO, we'll provide a link to that. I recommend you go and check it out. You can get a little more details on some of the things Ken talked about and shared. I want to thank Brian for joining us, and Ken, thanks for sharing all the great insights.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.